Ding ding, round 1B, or 2, as the case may be. We did our mods, it worked. There was a strange hum that developed from a loss of a ground on the speaker circuit, and the volume I kind of estimated for all my uses is too quiet. When we want to keep that amp clean, it's just too quiet. So the original plan, we removed this input circuit and replaced it with 168K resistor. I want lower than that, and historically, courtesy of Mr. Aspen Groove Tube Pittman, what tube nerd doesn't have this book, be it whatever edition? So, oh, look at that. Look at that. Oh, it's a twin, not a twin reverb. Anyway, that is probably a slightly earlier schematic than the ones I have worked on. This is the beauty of this book, is there are so many schematics in here. Yes, and an old cigar tab marks. Here it is, my beloved twin reverb, and sorry about the glare. So, in here, if I can get it to work without glare, there are resistors on the input side. And this was my favorite channel, I always noted, was vibrato number 2. And hold on while I get a pointer. Apologies about that. So, in these circuits, there were only 68K ohm resistors, and then the signal you see goes right into the grid on the first triode in the first preamp tube. So if you used input 1, you'd go through 168K resistor, and that is tied to the grid, but there was a jumper that would also put you through the 68K resistor on the number 2 side. So two separate paths of equal resistance. The total effective resistance is half that. So if you plugged into 1, it was basically twice as loud as if you plugged into 2, and it was so loud. It was ridiculous. So 2 even was really loud for playing in your house. These records are amazing and absolutely worth the price of admission of the book. And in here, this is the tone stack, and this is what I used for reference when I altered the year on my amp. But these values in a Fender tone stack of this era are really pretty standard if it had all bass, mid, and treble controls. So this is what the previous owner used as a model in his modifications, so of course I approve thoroughly. And this is the input transformer, the rectifier circuits, and then we go through the filter cap stages here. So these old records tell us how amazing pieces of musical history worked from every single component. So anyway, this is absolutely indispensable. Highly recommend it. Good news is all you need to know is one guitar nerd if you have just one question. That's a very common book. So I knew we needed to change our input resistance, but I didn't know to what. And in the last video I talked about just setting up a couple of resistors and having switches that let us cut them in or out. That would only work if you knew which resistances you wanted, and the only way to determine what resistances you would want is to use a bunch, potentiometers and bench test the whole thing and just fiddle with the knobs while you're sitting there playing with it on the bench, and then use that to determine what you wanted to do. But if there are holes in the back of the chassis and we're shoving components through, it's just as easy to shove this through as it is a switch. So, why handcuff yourself? I've never played with 25 watts for a long period of time and in various circumstances, gigging versus practice versus playing with others in a garage or in a basement, whatever. So I don't know I have no gut feeling for what's good. So what we're going to do is actually remove the resistor you've seen in previous videos, and use the holes vacated to make our own little network, which will start with the 34K resistor, that representing the minimum resistance you would see in those Fender circuits, and that was in there for noise suppression. So I don't want to go below that value. So now, instead of bench testing with pots and deciding on a resistor, we're just going to throw a potentiometer in the circuit. The problem was the old Fenders were either 68K, or two of those in parallel was 34K, and there's no such thing. Well, it's not worth it trying to find a 35K potentiometer, and I really have no idea what value makes sense. So looking through the stash, got a 10K linear pot and a 25K linear pot. That's 35, and 35 is close enough, right? So perfect. And I now have two knobs that I'm going to be sticking through the back of the amp. A little confusing, but oh well, you know, this is just a work in progress. Maybe I could make it be something more glamorous later, but right now we know doing it this way, we have effectively infinite variability, and it's really not that much more work to do this as it would be to bench test, determine resistors, install that network, and some switching. So yeah, I just won't determine it and do the work, and then we'll play and fiddle later. Okay, so that is our plan. Cut out the 68K resistor and build this series in. Oh, by the way, the 25K in the circuit is the gain knob that I yanked out and said was no good. So shows what I know. So we're going to reuse it, and hooray, it's actually going to stay in the amp it came out of, just in a different location. I've gone through, cleaned up the documentation, everything's noted. We are still looking for where this ground connection on our speaker went missing, so I'm going to get into that. And I actually wrote a note down here. Let's see here. Yeah. Okay, so that takes care of what we're doing for this next round, and then I promise when this is done, we'll do some testing with a guitar. And unfortunately, I'll be playing the guitar. I'm not a very good guitarist. I think I know more about tone and can manipulate it this way than I can with the instrument. But oh well, you're going to be subject to that. So we've got our plan for the next step. I hope this is fairly simple. And then when that's done, it said this reverb circuit was not at all great, being driven by these op amps, and I really would like to redo that as a tube amp section. That's getting a little complicated. So I thought what might be simpler, that Jensen MOD speaker is just not going to cut it long term. So I have bought a new speaker, and we have this external speaker connection. So the question is, does the new speaker go in the amp cabinet, and we move the Jensen and build a cabinet for it, or do I build a cabinet for the new speaker? Don't know. So that is going to be coming up too. But we're going to make sure to get some actual playtime in with this before it goes under the knife again. So, all right, here we go. Plans ready. Let's see how this goes.